Hello, everyone. This is the 16th episode of the Soccernostalgia Talk Podcast. As always, this is Sean from Los Angeles. However, my regular podcast partner, Mr. Paul Whittle, was unable to make it today. He'll be back for the next one. For this episode, I have the privilege to interview Mr. Bob Gansler, the manager of the USA national team during the 1990 World Cup. Mr. Gansler qualified the USA national team to the World Cup for the first time in 40 years, and in some ways paved the way for the growth of the game in the nation. Mr. Gansler managed the USA team at the under-20 level before his appointment as the manager of the senior squad in early 1989. Mr. Gansler, welcome to the podcast, and thank you very much for your participation in this interview.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Would you describe your trajectory leading up to your appointment as USA national team manager in 1989?
Well, I had been and still am around soccer. I started playing in the middle 50s, which is ancient history to you and perhaps more than a few of the folks that are listening. But was a player, and if we want to hone in on the on qualifying for the World Cup, this wasn't my first go around. I was there as a player in the late '60s. Played in the North American Soccer League in Chicago and was on that World Cup team, and we got close to qualifying for that World Cup held in Mexico, and a couple years later, the 82 and the 86 World Cup, I was an assistant coach with Walt Chizowich for U.S. Soccer. So this was my fourth time around trying to qualify. So it's always exciting, but it wasn't brand new as some people might have thought.
Right. And you also born in Hungary, I believe, before you emigrated to United States. I remember you also spent time in Germany. Is that correct, before coming over?
Well, without going into the colonial policy of the Habsburg emperors, I was a German. Our whole village was German, but we were in Hungary for about 200 years. And so we stayed German, and the school was taught in German and all of that. After the war, some folks decided that perhaps it was our fault that World War II happened. And so not only from Hungary, but also from Serbia and Croatia, which was Yugoslavia at that time, and other places in Europe, German nationals were sent to Germany. So my first 5 years I was in Hungary, being looked at as a German. The next 5 years I was in Germany, being viewed as a Hungarian. So it was okay because as a kid you think that's normal, but looking back now and seeing what's happening in our world in terms of immigrants, et cetera, I guess it was a challenge, but it didn't seem that way to us kids.
Right. In fact, I was going to bring this up. My next question. I was going to say that I read in Soccer America magazine. This is like around 1990. You in fact said that exactly, that in Hungary, you were looked upon as a German. In Germany, you were looked upon as a Hungarian. So, and that was kind of your childhood, so to speak.
So I'm really pleased that I can remember what I said then. So it was true then, it is true now. But I've been in America by quick calculations for about 68 years.
Oh, wow.
So I'm an American, double hyphenated American now. And I've been part of the soccer scene here for quite some time, and for the very simple reason I enjoyed playing. I played basketball and I played baseball as well. And I, at least in my opinion, I thought I was reasonably competent in those games also. But soccer was the first love that we, played in Germany on the streets and on the playground and all of that. And then I found it again in America about five years after we came here, because at least in Milwaukee at that time, there was no youth soccer. So when the men's teams needed some warm bodies for their third outfit, not their A team, not their B team, but their third outfit, they allowed us, the youngsters, to jump on. So that's how it started back in '56.
So now we must remind to the audience, the state of soccer in America when you took over in 1989. The NASL had collapsed for about 5 or 6 years or so. This is about a decade before the MLS. So there was no professional league. There was college soccer from which you would pick the majority of your selections, as well as an indoor league called MISL, Major Indoor Soccer League. The glory days of Pele and the Cosmos was a distant memory at this point. Furthermore, USA had not been at the World Cup since 1950. With all these obstacles, was there any expectations from the Federation that USA must qualify, in line with the long view that USA were to host in 1994?
Well, the importance, my father and my grandfathers always told me, is your own expectations. I did not dwell on the fact that what the situation was and what the, how should we say, the obstacles might be and all of this. It was an opportunity, you know.
Right.
As I said before, I had been there as a player, I had been there as an assistant coach, and so we came up short. But now there was one more opportunity. So rather than to bemoan the negative, you just say, all right, what do we got here? And you know, I got to give the NASL credit. And like I say, I played only there for 1 year. We had 17 teams in '68, and we woke up in '69 and we had 5. Or maybe it was 7, but it was an awfully small number, right? So, you know, but college ball was going, the amateurs continued, there was semi-pro stuff going on in this country. And also what had happened was, and you know, maybe not all people agree in terms of the impact of coaching, but coaching education started by Detmar Kramer in the early '70s, made us all better. Made the players better, made the coaches better. And so I had that opportunity given to me by the Federation, and I wasn't going to sit around and say, oh my God, I ain't got this, we ain't got that. What do we have? How do we do the best? And, you know, I'm full of trite sayings. And one of my favorites is, you're only as good as your next game. You're only as good as your next play in the game. You're only as good as your next game as a player and as a coach. And so we attacked it in that way.
Right. So you were excited, basically.
Of course. Right. It was a challenge, and it's always fun to be a pioneer. At least that was my mentality. And the young crew that we put together for that '90 trek was that. They were good, and they were excited. And they were full of not only talent, but also the intangibles, right? Which means pride and confidence. And we never spent any time feeling sorry for ourselves, right? We just said, this is an opportunity. Let's see what we can do with it.
Yeah, that was a reality of your situation, basically. So, yeah. So just the qualification itself was an adventure. I seem to remember the first match was lost at Costa Rica. Then you won 2 weeks later. The whole match with Trinidad ended late on as a 1-1 tie. It seemed like it was headed for a win, but late on they tied the match, and that was a setback. There were some struggles along the way. Late in the campaign, Tony Miola was introduced as a goalkeeper while he was still enrolled as a college student. All this culminated with a memorable match at the Trinidad. At November 1989, where USA unexpectedly won to qualify and end a 40-year barren period. What do you remember most from this qualifying adventure, the whole adventure?
Well, we had 8 games. That was the second half of the qualifying adventure. Lothar Osiander was there for the first. Werner Fricker was the president, decided to make a change, and perhaps the fact that the under-20 team that Ralph Perez and I had in Saudi Arabia in '89 found some new terrain. We finished 4th in the world. And not only we didn't used to qualify for youth adventures either. Right? We finished fourth in the world, and so Werner Fricker, asked me whether I felt I was up to the task, and I felt that I was, and so we put, as I said before, a talented crew of young people together who not only had talent, but they had drive, and they had that, American never say die attitude. And, there was 8 games. We lost the first one. You know what?
Right.
Even though we caught a late goal against Trinidad that you mentioned in that first encounter in LA, we never lost again. Now, some people didn't like the way we went about our playing, but we felt that our strength was to keep things tight, and we weren't going to average 3-4 goals a game. So the idea is then not to concede too many. And Tony was a big part of that, and I had known Tony. He was on not our under 20 team in '89, but the one in '87 in Chile, along with Chelo Balboa and Agus and some other familiar names to some of your older listeners. And and I followed him on the college scene, and he was not only technically sound, he was one of these big opportunity kind of guys. Right. So we said, hey, we brought him in. By the way, who was our number 2 on that team?
Casey Keller, right?
Okay, so Casey Keller was like 6 months younger than Tony. Right, so they were both in college, but they were good. So another trite saying that I've hung on to all these years is, if you're good enough, you're old enough, right? And they were good enough. So we put them there and on the roster, and they obviously they excelled. Not only that time around, but their names were heard for the next 20 years.
Right,
so,
right.
There was something there that was worthwhile pursuing. And you mentioned before that something about I qualified the team. No. The players qualified. Players qualified, and we tried to help and make sure that we didn't get in the way when they already had it well in hand. So,
yeah. How was the mood like ahead of the Whittle qualifier at Trinidad? Going into the game.
Well, we felt we were prepared, and again, as I was sort of anticipating your call here, and the memories start to wander in and out of this semi-vacuum that I call my head now. I had said at the beginning of that 8-game trek, I said more than likely it's going to be November time in Trinidad when this is all going to be decided. We didn't play it that way, and had we won the previous game rather than tied it, then it would have been better for us going into that game. But it was sort of like, look, this is an opportunity. Back to a saying that we mentioned before: you're only as good as your next game. And I think that refreshing young group there, they had that mentality. They were going to say, all right, that's done with. Some lessons there for sure, but now let's go. We got the wherewithal to win this last one.
Right. Now, despite the fact that there was scant press coverage of soccer in USA, apart maybe from Soccer America magazine perhaps, it did not take long for you to receive criticism. The most common one was your reliance on young, mostly recent college players. And there would be the occasional complaints from MISL players who were potentially more experienced and they felt they were being overlooked. How did you deal with this type of criticism, or is this something that every coach has to deal with?
Well, the latter is true, right? And later on, I coach in them and the MLS, and it's good when people are looking and saying, well, second guessing if you like, and it's for sure it's true that the folks who are doing the second guessing, they don't have a small, even a small percentage of the information that you have about what's going on. But the fact that they're interested is good, right?
Right.
You had MISL was an indoor league.
Right.
Okay? Now you play indoor 8 days a week. I'm over exaggerating. You play indoor all week long, and then on the weekend, right? Because the teams would never release these players to be with you for a training camp for a week or 2 weeks and all of that. For a weekend, then they would fly in and play. Well, we needed to have a team kind of a situation, right? And not an individual one, right? So we thought that young group, and we had a few middle 20s in there, and some of the folks that you can mention their names if you like, but not absolutely necessary, because they would come in and they wouldn't change what we had. So a team is what we were looking for, and we thought we had the wherewithal on our roster in order to do that.
Right. The USA's preparations were certainly unorthodox. Given that there was no professional league, the players were essentially contracted to the federation, and I am assuming trained daily, perhaps even double sessions, to prepare with an endless frenzy of friendly matches to come after. Now, with the likes of the now defunct Marlboro Cup and so forth. After a while, was there a siege mentality or a cabin fever with the group?
Okay, and what you're describing is what we did after the World Cup and what Bora Milutinovic had in order to prepare for '94.
Oh, right, the Mission Viejo, right.
That's what you're describing. Our situation was even, some might say, more challenging, but we didn't say, okay, we didn't bemoan that either. That's what we had. We didn't have a league, and these guys were not together every day and doing what we did in San Diego prior to '94, and then playing a couple of international matches at the end. Right. We would be Marlboro Cup. You can berate that, but it was the only way we could get some games sometimes, because Marlboro loved to have these things, especially down in Miami. Invite Colombia one more time, and they were very good at that time, right? And some others, and all of this. But we would play that game. Then these players would go home for 1 week or 2 weeks, and I would give them homework. I would say, let's work on this physically, work on this technically. Some of them would do it with their old college team or their high school team of years ago. Some of them probably would do their running with their favorite German Shepherd, because that's what they had. Then we would have the money to bring them back in for a couple of days prior to one of those games. But once again, that's what we had. We had to make the most of what we had, and so for sure, people would get tired. They were more mentally tired than physically tired sometimes. But they knew when they came back they had to run the Cooper. You recall the Cooper? 2 miles in what?
2 miles in less than 8 minutes, or is it? No, I'm sorry.
No, in less
miles. Oh, that's a mile. Yeah.
Yeah, it was the Cooper and all of this. That was in order to keep how should we say, them thinking about being fit. They knew that was our first activity when they came back. More often than not, we went to FIU campus. They gave us their field. We trained there down in Fort Lauderdale and all of this. And some guys had a hell of a time, because if you're a good marathoner, that doesn't make you a good soccer player.
Of course.
But it's an indication of general fitness. And I won't even mention the guys who were probably our best technical players had the most trouble with this. And by the way, that's what we coaches expected. But nevertheless, you had to somehow keep them responsible and fixed to staying fit and all of this sort of stuff. So a long answer to your question, but we were not together constantly. We were apart more than we were together.
Right. Oh, okay. And also, predictably, after the qualification, I think you were inundated with a list of potential players who could be selectable for the United States because they may be citizens, or if they're only given citizenship or things like that. Do you like? For example, like Roy Wegerle was cited as a potential international at the time, and a number of others. Do you recall being approached for such players?
I remember those names, and everybody wants to play in the World Cup. I wanted to play in the World Cup. I got the coach in one, so that's second best, right?
Right.
But I also had to be mindful of we're back to team, right? We as a team had to be better together than maybe the parts indicated. And you bring Wegerle in. By the way, another Ernie Stewart was mentioned way late, right? Way late, and there were others, and of course the MISL folks were knocking on the door and all of this. But this young group, they had just had achieved something, right? So all this trust that we had in them to get it to this point. Now you say, well, why don't you take a hike? That to me would not have been good managing.
Right. You had to remain loyal to the group that had gotten you there, basically. Yeah, which makes sense.
I've read that somewhere. Yeah.
So during the preparation phase, there was a special trip to Eastern Europe where you played matches at your native Hungary as well as East Germany, just months after the breakup of the Berlin Wall. And in a way, you were observing history in the making. What can you tell about that trip?
Well, we went to Hungary first, and we had, when I was with Walt Chisowicz as an assistant coach, we had played in Hungary. We had played in Nef Stadion with Louis Nanchoff and Angelo Di Bernardo and that crew, Tai Keo, and we actually had beaten Hungary at Nef Stadion, which they never forgot. They still remember that. I have Hungarian friends, and that's something that comes up now and then, and it's not me that brings it up. But we had an offer from Hungary and also East Germany to come and play matches, and we didn't have that many offers because for sure I think around the world we weren't viewed as someone that would be an overly attractive partner and to serve the purpose of their national team. So we played in Hungary, and that was phenomenal. It's still the country of my birth. I've been back there umpteen times, and glad that I am where I am. My family's where they are here in the United States, but it's still where it all started for you. And then we went to East Germany, and we actually were there when the wall was starting to come down. It's in the basement. I'm not going to try to find it right now, but there's a piece of that wall because Paul Crumpy, whose name you might have heard,
right,
at Claremont, right, and he had brought a hammer, and he knocked out chunks of concrete from that wall and gave it to those of us who were interested. I was certainly interested. So I do believe we, the United States, were the last home opponent for East Germany, because then the wall came down and they never played another game. And that was, it was really being there when history was made, and it's a remembrance for all time.
So we come to the World Cup now. Now, you would go on and select the youngest squad in terms of average age for this World Cup. I believe John Stolmeyer at 27 was the oldest. Chris Henderson at 19 was the youngest player at the World Cup. And you yourself were a young manager. I think you were 41 at the time, right? And I think you're the second youngest manager at the World Cup after Lazzaroni of Brazil. I believe.
Thanks for the 41. I was a little older. I'm born in 41, but
Okay.
but nevertheless, look, if you're good enough, we were good enough to get there with that squad. Chris Henderson was on our under 20 team, as well as Casey Keller, right? And Neil Cavone, who was our captain, who then after that gave up on soccer. He's a big time lawyer in Miami, and you know, great young man. And by the way, we picked them to sort of taste the atmosphere, because you've heard me say this before, or more than likely, some of the folks have heard me say this before, is we picked the team not only for 1990, we picked it for the 90s, right? And those folks who keep track of these kind of things, 6 of those players in 90 were starters in 94. So perhaps the quality of their game was underrated. And just the fact that they didn't have as many years on their calendar as maybe others, we didn't look at those things. We did not look at those things.
Yeah, I mean, being part of a World Cup is a unique experience. How would you define the whole atmosphere of being there in your bubble at the World Cup?
Well, I can't say it from a player perspective, but for me, it was extremely fulfilling, because it's something that, you know, I for sure dreamt of as I started to play soccer. That's the ultimate stage of the game, isn't it? That's Broadway, right? You don't get any better than that. And so it was that. Felt good about the fact that we got there, and now let's enjoy the atmosphere, but also we were there to learn. Because, as I said, young team, not only there for 90, but there for the 90s. Right.
The long view. Yeah. Unfortunately, the opening match would be disappointing, as USA would lose 5-1 to Czechoslovakia. Needless to say, there was the usual criticism that USA is not ready, this player should have been selected instead of that player, things like that. Looking back, what do you think went wrong for this match?
Well, you have to pay your dues, right? You have to pay your dues. And going to Budapest and going to East Berlin is not, or playing Colombia one more time in Miami, right, is not the World Cup. So you get there. There is a bit of an awe factor as far as the World Cup is concerned. We felt we were in a group, as you've mentioned, the 3 opponents. We were in a group with 3 experienced European teams, right? So by accident, whatever, we were in with 2 awfully good teams, including the host, Austria, which was a dark horse candidate coming out of the European qualifiers, right? And then Czechoslovakia, which had better players than maybe at least Austria, but they were a little bit in turmoil because this is still the time where players defect, and a couple of their better players had taken off for Italy. One later on up in Chicago and MLS, and all of that. Good players, but they were a bit in turmoil because the team, the vast majority of their team, didn't want those 2 guys back.
Right. And we should mention those are Lubos Kubik and Ivo Navlicek.
Navlicek was the left-footed forward and faster than a speeding bullet, and obviously Lubo was an extremely good player, as he showed in MLS as well, right? But hey, they had left Czechoslovakia. There was turmoil in their team because some of their teammates said, "Well, why did you desert us?" And others were envious because they didn't do it, and all of this. So we thought that this was our chance to come up with a positive result and all of that. And maybe we were a little too ambitious. in terms of the way we played, and it was, if you have seen the film, when was the second goal scored?
Like 41st minute or something. I don't remember. Was it a penalty kick? Yeah.
It was a PK just
Right.
before the referee was ready to the whistle for the halftime.
Right.
Okay, and that was psychologically, that was awfully tough for us.
Right.
Okay, then we came back out, and what's the next big event that happened?
Winalda was sent off.
Exactly, and now we're playing a man down, and we're playing certainly uphill, right? And even though Paul Caligiuri got a goal and made it 3-1, it was more than we could handle. So what we did not do well is manage the game with that kind of pressure in the World Cup. And so it had so and so or so and so from MLS, MISL been there and all of this, that's conjecture, right? That's conjecture, because they hadn't played an outdoor game in 3 years, right? So they were going to stand up to that kind of competition. Maybe they would have. I don't know. And I don't think any of your listeners know either.
Yeah. Was it a challenge to try to, I guess, I'm sure the players must have been really demoralized after such a match. I guess the challenge was to kind of raise their game again, right? Get their mood back up, I'm assuming.
Well, and now we go back to the intangibles. Remember I mentioned that earlier? These guys, they believed the fact that you're only as good as your next game.
Right.
They believe you learn from your failures, you learn from your successes too, and you prefer to be successful, but you learn from your failures as well. And now you go there. When we went to Rome, people knew who was in the bus, and so a lot of Romans were standing on the side and going like this. Now they weren't saying hello. You see my hands?
10 fingers,
saying, they were saying it's going to be 10.
0. Oh my God!
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, it's going to be 10, right? And so, fair enough. It was a challenge and a half, and I give credit to my young team who grew. How should we say? They aged quickly. They learned quickly, right? And we were. Let's see, if Zenga, this Derriere would not have been quite substantial as it was, Peter Vermees would have followed up Bruce Murray's free kick, and it would have been 1-1.
Right.
Were they better than us? Yes, they were. But we raised our game, and the thing I remember from that game more than anything else is, and it was already in the first half, the Italian crowd came to our side. They were counting the number of passes that we were putting together. So it was our guys acquitted themselves extremely well, and we don't want to talk about moral victories because it wasn't a victory, but it was the guys gave a good account of themselves and showed that they not only had talent, but also that tactically and psychologically they were able to rev it up quickly.
Right. So for this match against Italy, the World Cup hosts and actual World Cup favorites at this point, USA had no choice but to play defensive game. Steve Trichu, who had a disappointing game versus the Czechs, was dropped, and you installed the physically tall and imposing John Doyle in defense, along with the late Jimmy Banks. Italy would go on to score an early goal, and remember, they were awarded a penalty kick a short time later. And at this point, if Vialli had scored, perhaps everyone would have thought that, another route is on its way. But he missed the penalty kick. And after that, and especially the introduction of Doyle, helped to stabilize the American defense. And like you said, USA lost, but did gain a measure of respect after holding on for so much of the game. Is that gaining the respect of the crowd? I guess that was probably the biggest victory for you, as you mentioned, for this match.
You missed one important change. There was a third guy we changed. Cello Balboa came in as holding as holding midfielder for John Stallmeyer. And John Stallmeyer had been an ever present in the qualification and all of that. Cello was better in the air. Cello had more range, and Cello was a more savvy player as opposed to a physical workhorse kind of a player. So those three guys were the Jimmy. We had to bring someone in for Eric because Eric couldn't have played, and all of that. Now we can talk about that, PK. You know, what if? There are a lot of what ifs, right? Okay. I do remember even before that, PK, and certainly afterwards, our guys played with more confidence. We held the ball. We moved it around. We took the. Let's see. There was about 75,000 in that stadium. I think that's capacity in Rome.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, it's over 70. I think there might have been about 70 who had very small American flags, right? So we were certainly not, how should we say, going to be supported very much by that small contingent. But you know, we changed some minds, and our guys, I thought, reacted extremely well to that first game.
Do you remember how the press treated you after this match? I'm sure they must have been more complimentary, right?
Well, been to a lot of press conferences, and sometimes you get very good questions, and sometimes you're saying, "You got to be kidding! Where did you pull that one from?" I don't recall. I would imagine they ask about the turnaround and all of this, but I always felt that we were good enough to give a reasonable account of ourselves in that competition. So I wasn't surprised. I was happy for it. I was happy for our guys, and they're the ones who turned it around. So I don't recall any particular questions, no.
With USA already eliminated, the last match was versus Austria was a dead rubber match, essentially. It would turn out to be a disappointing match as the yellow cards just flew, as well as a red card, as USA lost 2-1. What do you recall specifically from this match?
Well, it meant more to us. Well, I guess Austria was extremely disappointed because they had lost 2 already. And as I said before, they were considered as a dark horse out of Europe, right? And they had players, big names, the Tony Polsters of the world,
right.
Herzog, who later on played in LA and MLS. They had players playing all over the big leagues in Europe and all of that, and they came up short also. So that's why there was frustration. I don't think we were frustrated to the extent that they were frustrated. And both of those goals, by the way, were on counters that they scored. One off a corner that we had, and then the other one I think was a free kick from the side that we had, and they scored off of that. So it's not like they dominated us. It's not that like they mauled us. It was like in game 2 and game 3, that's about what we could do at that time.
Right.
That's what that group of players. 4 years later, yeah, they could do more, and 6 of them got a chance. But you know, it was disappointing in a way. We thought that we could at least get a point from the first game, and maybe one here, playing Italy in the World Cup is probably you're imagining things. But I think we gave a decent account of ourselves, and it was that learning experience. Before I talked about paying your dues, I think American soccer paid their dues in terms of World Cup participation, and I think it showed 4 years later to an extent.
Right. Did you immediately fly back, or did the team stay for longer in Italy to watch the other matches, perhaps?
Uh, the players went, by and large, they went home. I think they had had a long enough stay from away from their family, etc., etc. My wife and the Ralph Perez and Joe Matchnick were my cohorts coaches, and their wives had come over also. My wife and I stayed. We watched a few more games and in the next round, including the final. I remember sitting just by that penalty box where the penalty was called, and it was one of the better dives, flies, whatever. Nevertheless, Germany was the better side, but
Right.
sometimes games are decided in mysterious ways. But anyways, we stayed, and actually, talking about Hungary and all of that, we stayed in Europe. My wife and I stayed in Europe, visited relatives in Germany, and went to Hungary at that time because the previous two times I had been there, I was not back to my village. Small village,
Oh, wow.
southern Hungary of 2,000 people. There were only about 500 left at that point, and it was interesting to walk where I had toddled as a 1 to 5 year old.
Yeah. So, however, look at it, this was a wonderful summer for you, in a way.
Well, it's a lifetime experience. Like I said, we always wanted a little bit more, and yeah, I would have. We almost qualified in '70
Right.
and when I was a player. Phil Woosnam and Gordon Jago were the coaches, and we were on our way. And then as we're playing the qualifiers, the league is falling apart, and I think our morale went with it. But it was an experience of a lifetime, and I will forever remember it. Just as well as I was in 2 under-20 World Cups, and that's what you shoot for. That's what you
Right.
shoot.
I would like to ask your opinion from a technical standpoint as a coach about the general quality of that World Cup. At the time, there were a lot of complaints about the defensive nature of the World Cup as a whole. How did you, in your position as a coach, how did you view it in general, the quality?
Well, at that time, more than likely, you were either playing with a 3-5, a 3-5-2. That's with a sweeper, a couple of man markers, 5 at midfield, or as I remember talking to Renus Mikkels about it, and they were in that World Cup too, and decided where they had never played with a sweeper, they played it with a sweeper. He says Germany won that World Cup not with a 3-5-2, but with a 5-3-2. Well,
Right.
what formations are we playing now? Ideally, when you're attacking, everybody attacks, and when you're defending, everybody defends. Right?
Right.
It was a little more chiseled at that time, but we played with a sweeper, a couple of man markers, 5 at midfield. There were the Latin teams more often than not were playing with 4 in the back, and then 4 at midfield, 2 up front. But the formations aren't what makes you offensively or defensively. Defense. It's the interpretation that the players have, and I think the game, and it's an evolutionary thing. The game has evolved. It's better now than when I coached MLS. It's better. It just as that time was better than when we were in the World Cup. And now it's more free flowing, and it's more people being more versatile and all of that. You make substitutions now in order to change
Tactically,
the basic tactics of how you're defending or how you're attacking. And by the way, I wouldn't be surprised if when we're all done with this virus, and we're all hoping it's sooner than later. I think they're going to keep 5 substitutes.
No, they have. Yeah, they've already made a decision.
Oh, have they? Well,
Yeah, they're gonna have 5 substitutions.
well, they have 5 substitutions now.
Now, no, they're gonna keep it.
Yeah, but I do hope they keep it, right?
Oh, you hope that? Oh, I thought you'd be
I
opposed.
hope they keep it because it makes the game more free flowing, and you don't have. Hey, if you've got a left back who is mainly a defender, right? You replace him with a left back who isn't really that good of a defender, but he's going to, be flying up and down that sideline and getting into the opponent's box. Are you still playing the same formation? No, you're not. It's the same with your midfielders, right? And all of that. So that's the way the game was played at that time. We felt comfortable playing the way we did because the guys we had on the team in their high schools, in their colleges, in their Sunday ball, be it amateur, semi-pro, whatever it was, most of the people in the United States were playing that way. So I'm not going to bring them in every second week and say, okay, we're going to play differently here. You work with what you had and just try to enhance that. So people can complain. Yeah, okay.
Right. Yeah, it seems like most purists are opposed to this this change in the rules of the game. They look at it as one more step in, the game going downhill. But I guess I'm surprised that as a manager, it seems like you'd be not just for tactical reasons, but obviously for lessen the risk of injury and so forth. You think that's a good idea?
Yeah. Well, do you remember a name, Ivan Toblak?
Yes.
Toblak was the manager of the NASL team in Oakland.
Right.
Okay, he was for many years. I don't know whether he is as we speak. A FIFA this and that. I remember listening to a presentation that he had. It's probably 10 years ago. It could have been more than that. He says, what needs to come, we're talking about changes and all of this. What needs to come is that we have more substitutions, right? We talked about, how about free substitutions? I know people say, oh, the college is this and that. Well, excuse me, if the game is better by you making a substitution, which not only brings a fresher player in there, but he brings a different tactical wherewithal, and now you change things around. What? And it becomes a better game. Why? You're a purist. What? The purists should be hanging on. When I started to play, there were no substitutions.
Right. No, it's in 1970 World Cup. Yeah, that's right.
There were no substitutions. So what the hell? I mean, it's like we have all sorts of little things that, well, that should not be. Well, these are man-made rules, right? They're man-made rules. Now we have 3 substitutions. There used to be one. There used to be one. There used to be none. I guess I don't want to be. We all have a right to our opinions, but you asked me mine, so you got it.
Oh, okay. So, end of the World Cup. Literally weeks after the World Cup, the USSF election, the U.S. Soccer Federation elections were held, and the then president, the late Werner Fricker, was replaced by Alan Rothenberg. After that, and perhaps even before that, there was a constant media speculation that a new big-name foreign manager was going to be hired. One day it was Beckenbauer, another day it was Bora Milutinovic, and this name or that name. So the media narrative at this point was that a coach would be appointed any day now. You yourself, you soldiered on and you continued managing the team, and again managed United States across the world in all the friendlies and so forth. Again, is this a type of pressure that every coach goes through, or was your experience more unique in this sense?
My wife is telling me to be a little less loud, I guess. So obviously it's something I feel still passionate about. that's what needed to be done at that time. Mr. Rothenberg for sure was getting some suggestions from FIFA in order to make it a more attractive World Cup in '94, and in terms of acceptance around the world and all of this, because there was still a lot of criticism from people who didn't get the World Cup, countries who didn't get the World Cup. Why the heck is the U.S.? What makes them so special, right? And all of this, and that's the way that business goes. I enjoyed playing, I enjoyed managing, and so I kept going for quite a while, and it was inevitable. We had that conversation, and that's fine. And by the way, both Milutinovic and Quiroz and Pereira, these are all World Cup managers, right?
Right.
And did they coach in MLS?
Yes, I believe so. Yeah. Yes.
How did they do? Well, obviously you really remember, because they didn't do well. Right. So it's like, hey, one thing about the U.S., right, and more than the three gentlemen that I mentioned, the U.S., this soccer market is unique, right? And a lot of time, our purest friends, and I have people at coffee clutches that speak like, hey, let's just play 11 against 11, and if three guys break a leg, well, tough rocks, right, and all of this sort of stuff. Right? It's unique. It's unique. Yeah. And we're nowhere else in the world is the academic side of sports the driving force behind the athletic part. So now, are you going to say to Americans, hey, no, you shouldn't do this. You shouldn't do this. You shouldn't play high school soccer. You shouldn't. Hey, we have to adapt some things from around the world that are good, that work here, right? That work here. And I worked with two gentlemen. Then later on, I became director of coaching at U.S. Soccer. One who was around before, Mark Kramer, and then Renus Mikkels, who advised us afterwards. And one of the things that was so beautiful about them, besides the fact that they were extremely talented and successful and insightful and all of this sort of stuff, both of them gave you the same message. This country is unique, right? So adapt some things, right? We're not here to tell you adopt what Holland does or Germany does or Brazil does. We have to go our own way, and that's not to say that we say that we're going to be how should we say isolationist and just not look at what other folks are doing. You look at the successful people and see what they do, and then see how would that fly here.
Right. You pick the best from different solutions, basically. Different.
Yep. Yeah.
So your last match in charge was, I believe, against Bermuda in early 1991, before you resigned. So at that point, you'd been in charge for 2 years, and it seemed like you've lived several lifetimes in those 2 years. Looking back after nearly 30 years, how do you look back upon those 2 years?
Well, it was not a good feeling to wake up to every morning, because it was inevitable, right? After the World Cup, what was going to happen. Right. And before that, I woke up every morning ready for the challenge, and I'd like to think that I did my best. I don't know what coaches go around saying, well, I'm really going to pick poor players here, and players that are this or that, and so I can tick off some folks in the media, et cetera, et cetera. You want to do your best, and that's what I tried to do. And even afterwards, when it was inevitable what was coming, I had been spoken to already that this position of director of coaching that I then took with the federation for the next 4 years, and oversaw the other teams outside of the World Cup team. the men's full national team. I oversaw that, and then coaching education, which I think served us well then, continues to serve us well, and is extremely important because anything that helps the player is of importance. So I did that, and I've enjoyed the journey.
Right. We already touched up on this. Some of the players that you selected in 1990 were again present at the 1994 World Cup in USA. These include Tony Meola, Marcelo Balboa, Eric Winalda, Paul Caligiuri, John Harkes, Tab Ramos, as well as Casey Keller, who was not present in 94, but he will be back for other World Cups. Surely the 1990 experience was a plus for making them, I guess, more ready for 94 when they achieved their objective of reaching the second round, which was significant for the time and the state of the game in USA. How did you view these players' evolution at the time, now as an observer in 94?
I felt good about it. I felt good for them, right? But what also had happened in those 4 years in between is that every one of those guys got a chance to play in Europe when there was no league here, and in that kind of competition. I remember you asked me about questions at press conferences. I remember a press conference before the World Cup started, or maybe it could have been because the guy asked the question in German, and then he wanted somebody to translate it for me. Aber Deutsch ist meine Muttersprache. So my German was better than the Austrian journalist. But nevertheless, he asked me the question. He says, well, how many of these guys here, it's almost like, aren't you ashamed of taking a place here in this World Cup because of this ragamuffin outfit that you have and all of that? How many of these players do you think could play in Europe right now? I said, well, it's always a matter of respect. And right now the U.S. has no respect in Europe in terms of their qualities. And okay, you earn respect. But I said, if people would give them a chance, there's at least a half a dozen here, right? If not 8 or 10 that could play in your league in Austria, right? And others, right? Sometimes I point things out to people, right? So, and he laughed, But what happened to those 6 guys that you just mentioned? They all played someplace, didn't they? Tab went to Spain. Paul went to Germany, et cetera, right? Okay. So, what makes a player better is playing, right? What makes a player better is playing with good people against good people. And they had that opportunity, right? And we were hoping that they would have that. But the fact, when they got into that next World Cup, there was no strange matter running down the back of their shorts because of the awe factor that I talked about before that we had in Florence, and which is quite normal. We're not the first folks that went into their first game in a World Cup and sort of, were a little apprehensive.
All right. Were you in contact with the players in the intervening years?
Yeah, some of them, some of them you see around. I've continued to do some coaching education. I did some scouting for the federation and all of that. And some of them you would see, others would call. Tab Ramos took me along to the under 20 World Cup. I think it was the one in 13,
right,
or maybe the one in 11, whichever one was in Turkey, right? And others have asked me to come by and watch their games as they're coaching in MLS or they're coaching in the A-League, their college teams and all of this sort of stuff. So I think, and I've said this before, and people maybe think that I overstated that. We not only looked for guys who could play, but we also looked for guys who cared. And the beauty of these guys, that whole group, with very few exceptions, if any, were they cared about this game and they cared about the progress of this game in this country. and that's why they're still there. So how many are coaching in MLS right now? How many are coaching in college? How many are directors of like Chris Henderson at Seattle, directors of soccer, et cetera, et cetera. They were good players and they were good people, and they were the right ones at the right time in order to help the evolution of this game to continue. And there's more good stuff to come.
Yeah. And like you said, I think it was the Gillette World Cup Series in 1990. You said in an interview, I think, that we are pioneers. And I guess we can echo that,
We still are.
Yeah.
We still are. But we've come a long way in a relatively short period of time. Now, young folks like you sometimes don't have enough patience. And it's amazing how much more patient I am now than I used to be, right? And it's an evolutionary process. There is no one thing, there's no one person, and all of that. That's going to change this around and now get us. We will win the World Cup if we get this guy as a coach, or we naturalize that guy from country X.
Right.
That's not the way it works.
A lot of times, unless you're a soccer historian, the achievements of players and managers from a different era are rarely discussed. Nowadays, it's just naturally assumed that USA should play in a large stadium. And I keep thinking back during your qualification matches were played in like these small college stadiums that would be beneath the standings of where a national team should play, and all the hard work that's been done since. So you and the players started a process whereby USA would go on and play in 7 straight World Cup. We'll just ignore this very last one. So to wrap this up, a very general question. 30 years after the fact, what's your takeaway from this unique experience that you went through?
Well, it was a necessary one, right? It was a necessary one. I talk about the coaching staff, and I would think that I can speak for the players as well. That's what we needed to do at that time, and we were up to the task. And it's an evolutionary process. And you know what? We didn't qualify last time, and people called and said, "Whoa, the sky is falling," and all of this. Excuse me, it happens. You get off the track, right? Now learn from it, and go ahead. And you're only as good as your next opportunity. Don't bemoan that one. But obviously, some things were or could have been done better, right? Okay.
Well,
yeah.
Well, it's a good sign that there was such outrage, because before, you remember, probably nobody would have cared, most of the media or anything. So the fact that there was this outrage is a good sign,
It is. More people are paying attention. I mean, now you're talking about stadiums, right? Now, when I went to work in Kansas City, this was 1999. You know how many soccer-specific stadiums the MLS played in at that time?
There was a Columbus one, I remember, but
Columbus was not like the stadiums that have been built since.
Right.
So let's not compare it to Atlanta. Let's not even compare it to the Galaxy. Let's not compare, et cetera, et cetera. So we had one that was like a glorified small college football stadium. That's what Columbus was. But we were thankful for it. I'm not saying that as without Lamar Hunt, and he did that too, right? We would not be where we are right now, because he is the father of MLS, right? And he had that build as well, right? And now look, I think the last time I checked, MLS was like 4th in average attendance for regular season games. This is before the virus and all of this sort of stuff. Okay, so you got England, you got Germany, and then you have Spain. The U.S. was 4th. It was ahead of Italy, and it was ahead of France in terms of total attendance for regular season games. was something like 21, 22,000, right? And almost all of them played in soccer-specific stadiums. Thank you, Lamar Hunt, for giving me a job. And you know where we played? We played at Arrowhead Stadium. It only holds 79,000. And usually there's more in there for the Chiefs games, right? So it was a different kind of an atmosphere. So we've come a long way in that as well, right? It still makes more sense from as we see with empty stadiums right now. I think it makes, it's a different feeling for players and coaches alike. If you are in a 20,000 seat stadium, 25,000 seat stadium, right? And it's full to the rafters, rather than if you're playing in a 79,000 Coliseum type of atmosphere, and you've got the same amount of people in there. So sometimes our purist or our young impatient folks think about it.
Right. Well, Mr. Gansler, it's been wonderful reliving these memories through your perspective. And I specifically want to thank your son, Bob Gansler Jr., as well as James Brown, who's a member of SASH and a friend of a podcast and USA historian, who were instrumental for making this interview happen, that I really enjoyed. And I can't thank them enough, and I can't thank you enough for this opportunity. So any final thoughts? Or we've covered everything, it seems like.
Hey, it's like I said before, it's been a nice journey. I'm glad I had the opportunity. I'm one of many, because from where this game was in '56 when I started playing as a 15-year-old on that men's team to where it is now, I mean, it is phenomenal, right? Yeah. And so to have been part, like I say, one of many, to have been given some opportunities along the way, you know, and some of them perhaps we could have done a little better, but it was never due to lack of effort, right? It was never due to lack of commitment and conscientiousness and all of this sort of stuff. But we've come, as I said before, we've come a long way in a short period of time. And one of the things we need, not only we need people to care, but we need people with patience, right? There's a realism here that we can't just, oh yeah, well, okay, now we've got to be like the NFL, or we've got to be like the Premiership, and why ain't we? Right. Because they've been at this for about 200 years. So right. It takes time. Evolution. It takes time. All right.
Okay. Yes. Well, thank you. And as always, feel free to leave questions and comments. For any comments, you can contact me on my blog. On Twitter, I'm on SP1873. I'm on Facebook under Soccer Nostalgia. My regular podcast partner who is absent today, Mr. Paul Whittle, can be contacted on Twitter at 1888letter. You may also follow the podcast on Spotify under Soccer Nostalgia Talk Podcast. Once again, thank you very much, Mr. Gansler. And I really want to thank you for this. We went through, I guess, an hour and a half and discussed so many memories, I guess, from my teenage years.
Well, hey, I've never felt like I had all the answers or even some of the answers. But I know that I was genuine in terms of my effort. And you asked me the questions, and
you responded. Yeah.
I give you my opinions, and you know what? You have a right to your opinion. Your listeners have a right to their opinion. I'm glad they listen, which means they care, and that's good. That it augurs well. There's many good things coming for this game yet in the very near future.
Yes. Well, with that, thanks again, and goodbye on my part. Thank you very much.
Au revoir. Wiedersehen.
Thank you.